add you into my intro.
Oh, good. Cool.
I don't know if you saw how I do my intros. I always like to add in the interviews and different people I've talked to. And actually, you're in the new one, which I did for the Political Matrix.
Oh, excellent. Excellent.
So I'll have to show you that one. I might even debut it in here as more people come in. I see we have Baba Yaga, Forest Dweller, my friend, in here. And, oh, this sounds like I got that echo on. Take the echoing out. I'm not trying to sound like the great and powerful Oz, even though I come from Kansas. But I don't know if you guys all see. I'm going to give you guys a little bit of time more to come in here. Oh, I got the birds chirping, so it obviously is going to be a good day. And we have a very, very special guest, a woman which I have a lot of respect for. I do try to keep up with the content, although I don't know if you guys know, as content creators, it can be hard to keep up with everybody's stuff because it's so much stuff. And then when you're producing your content yourself, you got to do your own research and try to pull up interviews. And so it can be easy to not keep up everything. But Lainie is somebody who I do like very, very value her perspective and always drops, these pearls of wisdom, in a conversation that I feel are often understated. So without further ado, Lainie, welcome to What I've Been Thinking with Marcus Cage. And how is your day going?
It is going awesome. We've got a pretty gloomy day here. As you can kind of see, the sunlight's not great, but you know what? We're expecting a major heat wave in Chicago this week for a couple of days. So I'm kind of just luxuriating in the cooler weather until the heat gets started again. I've got a friend coming over to put in my AC tomorrow. So.
Oh man, yeah. I tell people, if you guys don't know about Chicago heat, it's something to deal with.
Yeah, and people don't realize one of the reasons why Chicago has amazing indoor culture. We have incredible restaurants, we have incredible bars, we have incredible museums and theaters. We have all this indoor culture because the weather stinks. It's either hot and humid during the summer, or in the wintertime, it's cold and wet and miserable. So
Yes.
the weather is miserable most of the year. We have an amazing indoor culture. Come and visit us.
Yeah, I mean, I know that I'm definitely a big fan of Chicago. For those who don't know, or if you look into my background, what you guys can see is that is Kansas City Union Station, and when I think of Union Station, it makes me think of Chicago also, because Union Station, and the whole Elliott Ness and all that stuff goes on there. I'm a history nerd for those.
Okay.
But I used to go and travel to Chicago often because back when Vanguard Airlines was still around, it was only like a 45-minute to 50-minute flight.
Okay.
And so it's nothing to hop on a plane and just go to Chicago.
Sure.
And at that time, it was like $30 a month. It was really, really very affordable. So I guess it says my stream is about to be ready. There we go. I think that's it. Yes, I think we are live. Let me double check. There we go. Go live. And cool, we are officially live on Rokfin. Also, this is my third. This is my third one, so I'm excited. My third stream on here. I had two shows last night. We did. I had a little bit of pushback from a listener of the show. I guess they had some issues as far as wanting to talk Great Reset and the LGBTQ community and trans issues and things like that. And as you know, I'm a faith-based person, and I hope that I was able to lay out my difference of opinion in a respectful manner. But that was one part of it, and then the other part, we got into Bilderberg's World Economic Forum a little bit. And then an interesting theory that's been kind of going around the internet about the Buffalo shooting, which I don't know if you know about that, but we can definitely go into it. I see our good buddy Extra Bulla is in the house too.
Uncle Warren!
Yes, Uncle Warren. I saw that he's had you on. I still got to go back and check that out. I got so much love for Uncle Warren. He's such
Who
hilarious
doesn't
and
have
good guy.
love for Uncle Warren? I mean, how can you not love Uncle Warren? I'm just okay, Marcus. I'm going to
Mhm.
ask you to get on the campaign. We're trying to get Uncle Warren to move back to Chicago. He was born in Chicago, and we're
Mm.
trying to get him to move back here. So if we could all like just kind of work on him a
Hey,
bit.
I am with that because if he's in Central Time Zone, then that makes it easier for me out here on the West. And then also there is the possibility I might not necessarily stay on the West Coast.
Well, look here. I would be thrilled to have all of you nearby. Um, Uncle Warren,
I remember that.
what do I have here for you, Uncle Warren?
He needs it.
Yeah, oh yeah, he does. And that's well, actually, yeah. So, Uncle Warren, if you do move to Chicago, you'll see the writing crop again. You see,
Yeah,
reverse psychology.
up close and personal.
Yeah, but no, but I would love to have you guys. So we've got so many amazing content creators, and I love that people are from different cities and have different perspectives. But boy, there are some of you folks that I would really like to have close to be, maybe part of what we're doing on World Perspectives Radio. That's the internet radio station that I'm launching. Eventually, it'll be terrestrial. It will be terrestrial one day. But at Hard Lens, 99 Perspectives. So yeah, have more of you guys closer by. I think we'd all be real happy.
Yeah, I mean, the same thing. And like, I've been trying to at least bring our worlds closer as far as doing more collaborations and more
Sure.
talking to other content creators. I mean, though we are spread like physically apart in different areas, I feel like there is a community which a lot of people might not realize that goes on between content creators, and so I am trying my best to help foster and bring that tighter and closer together. Again, I mean,
Sure.
of course, I have my different thoughts, and some of it goes into
That's
the
the whole point. Yeah.
dystopian future, which I believe,
And
you
so do
gotta
I. So we can talk about more of that too, Marcus.
yes, you gotta have some pessimists out there, and I raise my hands, both of them. I am one of them.
Right.
But I tell people all the time that some of the people who are pushing for some of these other solutions and ideas and stuff. I hope that I am wrong and a little bit off, and what I'm thinking is not going to happen for another century or two. I mean, but if I'm not, I don't want any of us to be caught off guard. That's the most important thing. And so I guess I of course, I'm a big fan of Heartlands Media, all the stuff you guys are doing with 99 Perspectives and Chicago Corner. So first, I want to start off with just I guess giving us the ins and out, what's going on over there, what kind of stuff we can look out for, what ways that we can help you guys. I know about like the stuff you guys are doing with the urban music, and like a lot of the jazz and things like that. Some of the stuff about the wine and everything over there. So
Sure.
let everybody know like all the great things that are going on, especially for the people who might not be as familiar with Heartlands as
Sure.
I am.
All right. Hardlands Media started basically in 2017 when a group of people, this was following the 2016 election, a group of people who had interest in independent media in some way or another in Chicago got together. We decided we wanted to start a radio station. And as often happens when you get a bunch of people together, some people got along, some people didn't. And it was basically millennials and Gen Xers. I was the remaining Gen Xer, and there were the millennials. And we eventually started a radio show called Hardlands Media that ran on a local community radio station. So this was a very low power AM, unlicensed but legal AM station that also had an internet stream, and worked with them for a while. I had to leave the organization later in 2017 due to personal reasons, but I came back in 2019. And by the time I got back, they had left that station, although they had been on that as well as on a commercial station here in Chicago and on cable access television. Then they had moved over to YouTube because they had connected with somebody who was a very successful YouTube creator.
Mhm.
And so what ended up happening is that Hardlands Media regrouped and got launched on YouTube. And that was when a whole lot of stuff started happening.
Yeah.
And we started really building up. It was like leaps and bounds. We were growing. And we ended up getting a studio, renting a studio space in a commercial building. Also at that time, the company, the organization founded 99 Perspectives, which is the kind of the holding company, and began to rent out our services and our studio to third parties to bring in extra income. One thing people don't understand, and I didn't understand it, so this is just as much on me, is that when you look at traditional media, like traditional TV stations, news is a loss leader. Doesn't make much money.
Yeah.
You make your money from your entertainment. And so what started to happen, eventually what ended up happening, we also started a separate show called Chicago Corner, which focused entirely on Chicago, because it turned out that our viewers from around the country and around the globe didn't want to hear about Chicago specific stuff. Okay, I can understand that. What eventually happened was we ran into trouble with YouTube's censors, which, by the way, is mostly a bunch of bots that don't work very well. But it became painfully obvious that YouTube wanted to marginalize any type of independent media. And we started getting strikes. There was the shadow banning. So Daniel Lupker, the CEO of 99 Perspectives, in his brilliance said, okay, we got to figure out how to bring money in here so we can keep our media group, our news media group, going. And so in addition to seeking out more clients, and we were able to, even during the worst of the global health crisis, we were able to do remote stuff for people. So that worked out. But he also started creating reaction channels. And so that started going. And we had these great deal of success with our reaction channels. And then we broke out Chicago Corner. We went back on CAN TV, cable access television, and that's been great under the labor and leadership of my highly esteemed colleague Jerry Vassilatos. And then we wanted to go back to doing a radio station again for a number of reasons. So I have been working on that. And so right now I do Civically Minded, which is Hardlands Media's regular Thursday show, which tends to focus a little bit more on issues of civics, consumer rights and advocacy, the regulatory state, what these regulatory agencies are doing, but also on issues where less on hair trigger hot topics and more on things that affect everybody.
Yeah.
Also, I talk about the media a lot. And then we have World Perspectives Radio Chicago. And right now it is an internet station. We were able to get somebody was kind enough to donate a massive music library. We've been adding additional music. So it's 24/7 music, kind of a freeform thing. But now we also have a couple of shows. I do a show called the Chicago Wine Report, where my colleague and I, we visit various wine bars and shops around the city and report on what's going on in the city's wine culture. We also do a show from 2 to 4 every Wednesday, which is my Chip Dudley and myself. We talk about news and current events. We can get a little spicier than we can on YouTube because of the nature of what we're doing. We have a show called Black Music Chicago. One of our local great blues musicians, Mr. Chip Ratliff. Yeah, we got 2 Chips on our station. He regularly puts together shows where he features Black music from different areas, from different times and different places here in Chicago, because he wants, Chicago was the Mecca of Black music. And he wants to bring that back to our city. So it's very educational in addition to being able to listen to some great music. And he's all over the map when it comes to the kind of music on there. So
I've heard, and being from Kansas City, being from a jazz city also, there's a lot of I feel like even though they're probably about 6-7 hours apart, there's a lot that's very similar to these 2 Midwestern cities. I guess Chicago's just a lot faster paced. And I noticed out in the chat, Beamworthy says, we need a St. Louis corner in St. Louis. So much going on here, which what I would say being worthy is, um, if you don't know somebody else who would want to, I think maybe you should probably get in touch with Lainie, and that way you can kind of, figure out some of the ways of getting some of that about, because I would love to see, especially being a Midwesterner, a lot more things, a commentary and what's going on in the Midwest, because I feel like it gets such a
Absolutely.
bad rap.
Yeah.
It's looked at as flyover country, that
Yep.
only what matters is on the coast. And I'm like, me traveling through, I've probably been to maybe 40 different states, um, and a lot of different cities in there. What I learned is most cities have something that's unique and special about that city that you can only get at that city. And so we
Right.
need to be able to have the perspectives from all of these different cities. So yes, I mean, that's why I wanted to let everybody know I'm so, I
Yeah.
love what you guys are doing over there,
Yeah.
especially with Chicago corner. I would love to see a Kansas City corner
Yeah,
too.
I think we'd love to see that as well. I mean, there's something that could be talked about, particularly with the radio station, only because the radio station, we have a lot of flexibility with that. So I'm happy to talk to folks
Mhm.
about that. The other thing I wanted to mention is we are getting a new radio show. Actually, it's a reboot of a show that's been in Chicago for about 5 years, had to stop broadcasting during the global health crisis, but it's called Magic Radio Chicago. And it is a show that focuses on the alternative religious community in the
Mhm.
Chicago area and around the world, paganism, neo-paganism, occultism, paranormal, new age, and so that show is coming back to the station as well. So it's going to be we're working on it. We're building this up. So it's kind of an exciting time.
Well, and that's a good topic to go into, and I'd love to talk to. I want to throw a special shout out to my boy Cy Laws out there, my good buddy and co-host. Glad to see him here. And anybody else who's coming in here, glad to see you guys also. And I will be double checking back and forth. So when you guys see me on the screen, I'm just checking Rokfin also for comments there. I want to make sure I keep everybody engaged in this conversation. For those who do not know, can you let people know like some of your background? Because I remember when I first started finding out, I was very impressed with it. It was very interesting, and I think that because of like a lot of the work which you're doing right now and that you're specializing in, a lot of people might be surprised at where a good point of some of your wisdom and knowledge and background comes from.
Sure. Well, my background is, I mean, I went to Illinois State University. I mean, by the way, you were talking about the kind of the Midwestern thing with St. Louis. We had a lot of students from St. Louis that came to Illinois State because we were Central Illinois, and so there was a lot of a lot of crossover there. But majored in philosophy with a minor in women's studies. Went to Garrett Evangelical Theological Seminary up here in Evanston, which is a kind of a city suburb just north of Chicago. It's on the campus of Northwestern University, and got my Master of Divinity, which is the professional degree for clergy. And then eventually went back and got a Master of Theological Studies from Garrett Evangelical, which in my thesis was on the decline in the number of women ministers in classical Pentecostal denominations here in the U.S.
Which I needed to get back to you on that, which I did. I'm about 80% of the way
Okay, cool.
through it. But yes, I have been reading it.
Cool. So that was what I focused on, and then I went and got a master's degree in library and information science. Essentially, I'd hoped to go into perhaps an academic career. I decided against that, but the library degree seemed to make sense. I was thinking about becoming a theological librarian. But in any case, that all changed. And so effectively what happened was in 1997, I had made a decision to kind of be out of the mainstream of Protestant Christianity in this country, which was probably a good idea on my part. Was ordained in an independent sacramental church, which is the ISM, the Independent Sacramental Movement. It's its own theological and religious movement in its own right. I was ordained in that in a small, very small church in that movement. And I ended up working in business for a long time. And I got the degree in library and information science, and then the economy crashed. And everything just, there were no jobs, you couldn't buy a job. But I had been a writer, and so what I did is I ended up in 2009 essentially became a freelance writer. And actually having that degree in library and information science, interestingly enough, got me a whole lot of writing jobs, because they wanted people who knew how to research and put things together. And the other thing that had happened is, one of the jobs that I had worked as, I was a regulatory compliance administrator for a publishing house. So I learned to research laws and regulations. Well, I was able to bring all of that writing and research and media experience over to Hard Lens. And so
I can see it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that's kind of what happened there. And so it was very fortunate, because I had been writing scripts for a news program, a small program down south. I had been writing stuff, legal stuff, blogs and articles on all kinds of legal topics, consumer topics. Plus, when I was in regulatory compliance, I was working in the real estate sector. So all of that kind of came together, and that's part of what I've been able to bring over to Hard Lens.
Yeah, I mean, I can see it, and it makes sense probably why I'm drawn to a lot of your work. My background, would be, well, I've always been a pseudo historian. I mean, I'm as a kid, I literally, no lie, have read through 2 versions of full encyclopedias, cover to cover. And so I started off that way, and then with all the traveling and just a very diverse ethnic background, being steeped in a bunch of different cultures at the same time, and never being able to be one foot squarely in one or the other. And then, being a kid who was raised deeply into the church, between Catholicism and Baptist church, and even AME Zion Church. For those who don't know, that's African Methodist Episcopal Zion. And so going through all of those different things, and then started studying more New Age religion, and trying to understand the Quran, and then philosophy also. So, you going to school for philosophy, and for religion, and then that background and understanding law, especially like the different codes and regulations and things like that. Things which most people don't realize are really the things which keep everything going. And that's how you actually move in this world. You can know the overall, but if you don't understand that how to cross those T's and dot those I's, that's where everything falls apart. And I can definitely see that, especially the researching. A comment here, I got a couple for you. Where did that go? It says Glenn Conner says Lainie is the best. She always focuses on the important events, and if they aren't splashy or sexy. And that's what I was saying about the research. I don't know if I said it before we got on or as soon as we got on, but I said Lainie often finds different things where it might not be a subject which everybody is talking about, but it is something of mass value that we need to be focusing on. And that's what we try to do over the Political Matrix also. Yeah. We try to talk about issues that we don't feel get enough attention, or stuff that we feel, okay, this is something you guys need to have your eye on. We might not have all the answers for you. We might not be correct on everything, but you need to be watching this. This is what we feel. I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this question, but I will ask anyway. Beamworthy says, also asked her if she knows Ralph Waldo Emerson or like him.
I do know. I know who he is. I never really got into the Transcendentalists. I do know that he was a friend. People don't know this, but he and Henry David Thoreau were friends with Bronson Alcott, the father of Louisa May Alcott, who wrote Little Women, these very famous books. So they were all close together. I never really got into, I really need to do more of that, but never really did that. But there were these fascinating themes of literature and philosophy and who was in contact with who, kind of like we're doing with content creating this
Yeah.
day. Just
Yeah.
people just seem to network. It comes naturally to us.
Well, I tell people, and it's kind of funny, the shirt. I'll lean up so everybody can see the shirt, but I got Voltron on, and because I honestly think like that's how we have to go about this whole system. We
Yeah.
have to lean on the areas where we're strong and lean on the areas where other people are strong. And I don't know which part of the Voltron piece that I am. I could be a thumb. I could be a kneecap. Oh, probably not a kneecap because I got bad knees. But I
Yeah.
could be. I don't know which part I am. But I look at all of us have to try to. Well, the ones of us who are really trying for the right
Yeah.
reasons, of course. But we have to all try to bond together and figure out, okay, this person's doing that over there. This is needed. How do we add this together and fuse this? Because there's so many other people, which I'm thinking of in the back of my head, where I'm like, they really need to be reaching out to you on some things too, because I see where stuff you're doing is tying in with what they're doing. And maybe once those things get together and married, it's better for the overall audience. Because that's where my mindset is always on how do we inform the masses and get these people, prepared and knowledgeable of all the things that they need to see coming. Being Worthy also asks, do you know Michael and Justin Thomas, New Dimension?
No, I do not.
Justine. I'm not familiar with them also, so Being
Okay.
Worthy, please let us know. But I definitely I do know about Emerson.
Yeah, a New Dimension. I mean, the only New Dimension, and that may not be I don't know. There's a New Thought church in Chicago on the South Side called New Dimensions. I don't know, and Bishop Carlton Pearson's involved with that, so I don't know if there's a connection there, but I've not heard of them.
And Hamza, yes, sir. I am live on Rokfin also. So if anybody who would like to hop onto Rokfin, please let me know. Just hop in there, say hello. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe, because for those who just follow the my what we've been thinking channel, or just the Political Matrix, I'm going to be all the content from both of those channels will be going on to that Rokfin channel. So it'll make it actually easier for you guys to be able to catch everything all in that one place. And then eventually, there will be some stuff which I will do exclusively Rokfin, and there'll be some stuff from Hebrew Apologetics, which I might go into on Rokfin. Also, still it's all new, so still working all this out. You said something a little earlier that I find interesting that I would like to plug your brain on. I know that your deep theological background and philosophical background, and you were talking about the content that you guys are creating for a bunch of different New Age religions, paganism, all those different things like that. I was wondering, how does that work sometimes? Just from that different philosophical point or theological point, because I know myself. People will think that because I have a certain theology that I have to not deal with other people's ideas, me personally, what I believe is what I believe, and I don't feel like I have to impose those beliefs like evangelicals like to do. I don't feel like I need to impose them. I also don't feel like I'm being heretical if I am allowing other people to, I guess, give me their perspective. So,
Sure.
I mean, what's your thoughts on that? Because I know some people can look at that from the outside and maybe not see it quite the way I see it, or maybe how you explain that you see it. So I just kind of want to let you explain.
So World Perspectives Radio Chicago is we're building that up to actually be a radio station for the people of Chicago and elsewhere to listen to. And so I want to encourage a diversity of perspectives and beliefs. And religion is an important part of communities and civic life. And there are people in this community that have religious perspectives that differ from other people's religious perspectives. And Magic Radio Chicago does a really good job. Our host, Drew Prince, I used to be his co-host on the show several years back, but he's kept this show going for a long time. And so while he's part of some of those communities, he doesn't agree with every perspective on the show, but these are people who are part of our communities. And there was a strong listenership. People were supporting that show. So what I would say is that, it doesn't, there's going to be, I hope that eventually this radio station will include a range of perspectives, a range of topics, some of which are consistent with my own beliefs and practices, and some that are not. But I have no particular interest with any objection to giving a platform to information that provides information and news by and for and about my neighbors. And my neighbors some people are religious, some people are not. Some people are from various and different religions, but the goal of the radio station is not to hawk a particular mindset. It is to give a voice to what's going on in the community and in the country.
It almost sounds like almost a version of decentralized religion in a sense, because in my perspective, and I'll just lay out, I'm not putting this on Lainie, my perspective is that most of the Abrahamic faiths, especially Christianity, is for the most part kind of like a top-down one acceptable mode of thinking and understanding, the Bible or the prophecies and things like that. And though there eventually became, offshoots where people have kind of accepted their own beliefs, like you spoke about with your with your background with IMS, you do have a lot of the mainstream, I guess I'll say Christianity for right now, because we can go into Islam. That's a whole another can of wax. Yeah. But for Christianity, though you might have like Lutheran or Baptist or Pentecostal, you have all these different versions. What's acceptable from the mainstream as far as Christianity is, for a lot of parts, very similar across the board, and there's not much flexibility for you to think outside of that. So, a platform where people can actually explore their differences and what their viewpoints are, because in my faith, in my belief, I literally believe that all of the gods were created. Every nation has gods. And so they all, a person who's from this nation is not wrong for following what their nation says, as long as it doesn't go against certain overarching worldwide sense. It's like you have, like I believe in virtual different covenants. And so, of course, like I'll give you one, for instance, like remember, about, of course, Moloch and Baal and sacrificing the babies at that, literally burning. For those who don't know, in ancient faiths, they would literally sacrifice newborn babies, burn them alive, as a sacrifice to gods for a better life. And that's like one of the things that's extremely like, that my belief in my creator is against. And so even if you decide, okay, well, in this faith, you eat pork in this one, but you don't eat pork in that one, depending on the nation, it's not a uniform code on every single thing. It's just certain major things. I don't know. Do you agree, or maybe I'm a little off?
Yeah, I mean, there are some things that I have a real difficulty with. I mean, I know that child sacrifice, for example, human sacrifice, child sacrifice,
human sacrifice too.
Yeah, has been practiced by various groups around the world. Happened for a long time. I know that, in particularly when it came to children, my understanding, and I'm by no means an anthropologist, that was relatively rare, at least in some cultures. And if it happened, it was because the culture was in immediate peril. And if anything, it may have been a way to spare children suffering. I'm not really quite sure, but I think that that's a bit much. I mean, I do find it fascinating, the idea that countries have their own gods. I find that interesting. I don't know if you ever read American Gods by Neil Gaiman.
Oh yes.
Yeah,
Big
I
fan
mean,
of
which
it.
I
Yeah.
thought it was a brilliant illustration of that kind of concept. And then, of course, when they come to America, when the avatars of the gods come to America, everything gets messed up because America is messed up. And so, I mean, and that happens. So I mean, I think that's, I think that, the one thing about the U.S., and I think that sometimes we don't understand that because we live in the U.S., is that we don't have a state religion, and that religions are able to operate and practice far more freely than in other countries. I mean, even in countries like, I think it's Denmark, if you have a religion, you have to register with the state. Now, you'll also get money from the state.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be Christian. You don't have to be Church of Denmark. That's the Lutheran Church. But and so you've got, or if you're like in the UK, at least until recently, there were very specific places where you could perform a marriage ceremony. And you could go to the registry office, or it had to be in a church or a building that is registered for that sort of thing. So there's a lot more control on religious practice, and what is considered to be legitimate religious practice in other countries, even countries that we think about and usually are relatively open democracies. So I think that we've kind of got a very different way of understanding religious practice. Like in Illinois, my own state, the law basically says if you are considered to be clergy within your church, and your church doesn't even have to be licensed or organized or incorporated, you can perform a marriage ceremony. And there it is, and it's that loosey goosey. So I think we just don't necessarily have the same perspective that people have worldwide about religion because of just the American character.
I completely agree with that. I mean, like, and even throughout the different parts of this country, you have some places in like for instance, Chicago. I would say if you had to lean on what majority of the people from the Christian faith would be, it would be more Catholic heavy.
In Chicago, yeah, because you have a lot of Irish immigration. You
and
have
Italian.
In Italian, and also some Eastern Europe, Polish, very much so. So there was that. Although you get some interesting things because you had a lot of Swedes that came over, and the Swedish state church, they don't have a state church anymore, but at that time was Augsburg Confession Lutheranism, which had apostolic succession. And so a fair number of Swedes that came to the U.S. early on, or came to Chicago earlier on, ended up going to the Episcopal churches because they were basically told the Episcopal Church, it's a Protestant church that has apostolic succession. So you get some weird features of religion, what happens when you've got this shift, when people are settling in other countries and that sort of thing. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Well, yeah, and I also think it's like, for instance, a lot of people, especially since there's not a lot of information about, well, I'm not going to say it's not a lot because that would be inaccurate. It's not widely available. A lot of the faith practices of like a lot of people, the transatlantic slave trade and like that before they got over. So a lot of times it's taken as if all of those people automatically would fall under the one of the Islamic faiths that are in those areas, or some of the animistic faiths, which are some of those areas going into like Anansi, and you know where I'm going with that.
Yeah.
But I don't feel like it's ever looked into, and how these things are like tied in, and especially it makes a difference between West Africa, East Africa, South Africa, all those things, just like different parts of Europe, because even with this Russia-Ukraine thing, I don't think how many people realize how much of a factor religion is in Russia.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that maybe some people, I don't think people understand it. I don't think people in America in particular understand Eastern Orthodoxy all that well. I mean, yes, we've got plenty of Eastern Orthodox here, but it's still, as far as mainstream Christianity goes, it's kind of one of the more marginalized mainstream expressions of the faith here in the U.S., not certainly in Greece or in Eastern Europe or in Russia. So I think that there is that definitely as well, and it is. I think also I suspect that there, and this is I can't say this is absolutely the case, but I suspect that a lot of people in the U.S. who are, say, over 50 and over may still associate Russia with atheism or secularism because of the Soviet Union.
Yes.
And they may not fully understand the role that religion plays. And I'm not claiming to understand it myself, but then they may not understand exactly the role that religion plays now in post-Soviet Russia. So that may be a factor as well. I'm not sure.
No, I think you hit on a very, very good, solid point there. I don't believe people get that. And I believe, though America is looked at as a Christian nation, and because of how many so-called Christians are here, when you start even talking to these people about even the faith which they say that they have, a lot of them, there's not a lot of really researching. It's almost like the old Catholic Church. I'm talking about as far as the Roman Catholic Church, how they would go, listen, be told something, and just kind of walk out. There was no taking it home, studying on their own. In fact, that was actually illegal. But I don't think a lot of Americans think about the fact that America is actually more closer to an atheistic nation than anything, and just going off of certain tenets supposedly of the Bible. And I feel like because especially, and I hope I'm not being unfair when I say this, and slap me on the hand if you feel I'm wrong, but I feel especially more in the Caucasian community, there's a much higher level of atheism. And when you factor in how many people are, especially once you factor that in with power and CEOs and things like that, I feel like you have a much higher population of people who are controlling and running things who are actually atheists or hardcore evangelicals. And you're only getting these two sides of the narratives versus all of the different nuances of other people who may hold different forms of Christianity or orthodoxy or even Islam or any of these other faiths. I think it's kind of being focused on only you're an atheist or evangelical for the most part.
I think that's an interesting perspective. You certainly do. I mean, this is my opinion, of course. When I was in seminary, there were some there were some really hot topics, which I'm not going to discuss here because I don't need the blowback. But there were things that were
we'll do
causing. Yeah, well, I'm not even going to do it there because I don't need the issues with people.
Well,
but
we'll do it off cam.
Okay, we'll talk off cam.
We'll talk off.
Okay, but there were some certain issues that were really affecting mainstream Protestantism in the U.S. And when I'm talking mainstream primarily white churches, Protestantism, I'm talking about what you call the Sister Seven. The Episcopal Church in the United States, the Presbyterian Church in the United States, the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, the United Church of Christ, the Disciples of Christ, the American Baptists, and the United Methodist Church. Okay, so these are just this are mainstream milquetoast Protestantism throughout the U.S. And again, there are differences of opinion within these churches. So I'm not saying every individual church or every individual believer or clergy, but for the most part, these were considered to be the most mainstream. And there were certain issues that were tearing these denominations apart. And these were issues where people had been yelling at each other. You had scholars looking into this. You had different perspectives, people going after each other time and time again. Tears were being shed. Time and resources were being completely wasted on these issues. What was keeping these denominations together? Well, when it came down to it, it was the pension fund. It was the pension funds. It was also, in some cases, the real estate. because in some of these denominations, if a church left the denomination, the building would revert to the property, being the property of the denomination, no matter who built or maintained that church building. So there was mammon, right?
Yep.
It's money, okay? And it was money, issues of money, that were keeping these churches together because nobody was willing to let go of that money.
Yep.
Or that property. And so that, in my opinion, you cannot serve both God and mammon. Right
Yep.
there,
Cannot.
there was basically, I'm not saying that it was atheism, but there was certainly another perspective that had nothing to do with Christianity that had come in and was holding those churches, those denominations together.
Well, when you bring that up, that actually ties together, some of those things that are going on, and going back a little deeper into our American history. A lot of slavery was kept propped up with the Bible, and I feel like the backdrop of that was about commerce. And if you think before that to what led to a lot of the conquest and stuff like that, and the Crusades and different things like that. All of these things had to do with wealth. I mean, literally going back to papal bulls written by the Pope about how you can go into any non-Christian nation and basically rape, rob, murder, pillage, steal, do whatever you wanted. And as long as you were bringing those funds and resources back to the kingdom or the empire, a lot of that is similar. So what we see is the early Catholic Church and some of the wealth and corruption from there, and then that leading into the conquest of discovery, and then that leading into the invading and even pushing a lot of missionaries, because especially throughout Africa they use a lot of missionaries as their way to ease their way in, and then eventually start to conquer and take over. And then you saw the same thing with the Americas. The same thing was done. What was it? Kill the Indian, save the man. I don't know if you guys know about that out there.
Yeah. Residential schools.
Yeah. All of the boarding schools, all of that stuff. And I look at that key tie is they have all of those at the top for the most part. I'm talking about not the individual, because I never try to relate it as in every individual is part of that, because I know how nuanced everything is and we're all mixed up. But I noticed the overall rot that I see in these is they profess that they're doing one thing when most of this is all going back to mammon.
Yeah, it very much is. And if you look, for example, clerical celibacy, Peter is supposed to be the first pope. He had a wife.
Yeah,
we know that.
The Bible doesn't tell you have to be celibate.
No, it does not say that. I mean, you can be, and that's one of the nifty things about Christianity is that there isn't a mandate to marry. So if you want to be single, you can be single, or feel that that's what your calling is. That's who you are. The interesting thing is that clerical celibacy was commanded because the Catholic Church, didn't want to fight with a priest's heirs over land. And in the States. So, I mean, this is, and to this day, Eastern Orthodoxy, they do have married priests. Bishops are supposed to be celibate, but they will even allow for an ecclesiastical divorce, which makes no sense to me, but I'm not going to go there. So you had that. And now if you want to talk about missionaries and mammon, let's look at a feature that you often see. It's oftentimes in evangelical churches, but not entirely in the U.S., where you have missionaries are expected to raise their own support. So they get their churches, their friends, their families to give them money to go to another country to do something, whereas that amount of cash could have possibly significantly impacted these communities in some very positive ways. If it had been invested in the communities or invested in the theological education of clergy in those countries. You see, there's a huge business in the U.S. with high school mission trips. And again, you get these kids who are raising, $3,000, $4,000 to go on a mission trip to paint a church in a rural community in a developing country and that church has probably been painted 15 different times by 15 different youth groups. All that money, in some cases, we're talking depending on the number of kids, $30,000, $50,000 per trip that an
Yep.
agency is getting. It's not going into that community, and it is suppressing the value of labor in that country. They could have hired, if the church needed to be painted or a school needed to be painted or outfitted, that money could have gone to local contractors, putting them in
Yeah.
business and having a professional job done rather than having a bunch of 14-year-olds come down there. And so, and if they wanted the kids to get experience of other countries, there's this thing called tourism. And there are many countries that encourage tourism and that offer tourism so that the kids could come and see another country, interact with people. All these things could be done, but instead, the money ends up with the mission agency.
Yep. It's funny you said that because it's one person, and I'm probably a jerk for putting it all on this person. I don't really like him, but anyway, Tim Tebow is the person who pops to mind when I think of that,
Right.
because he is a postal boy. I mean, can't even talk right now. Poster boy for that. He was a well-known evangelical Christian, and that's some of the stuff his family did. He was homeschooled, all that. He was real big about his vow of celibacy till marriage, which that goes into my understanding on that goes different than some others, but that gets into the weeds and arguing the scriptures. Like first, you still got to believe in the scriptures. It gets to this, we're not going to go down that route. Well, not now. I don't know. Maybe we'll see. But I think it's all interesting because I don't think we, especially on the left, so-called, have these kind of conversations. And I think it's because more people on the left have just looked at only the mammon side and the corruption and the prosperity doctrines, and have just thrown the whole baby out with the bathwater in a sense. And I feel like I get, even if you want to say, all of that is whatever, I don't buy into any of that. But if you don't take the time to understand it, you can't understand the nuances of what are motivating some of these people and some of the things which they're doing and helping inform our world. Because we got to remember, a lot of these people which we put into office, which are politicians, which these corporations are basically governing us, which I know some people might not agree with that, but even if they're doing it through soft power, they still have a tremendous amount of control over us, especially you talk about that with the media. But if you can't understand where these people are coming from and the things that motivate them, then how do you understand what's being done to you from these people?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a really good point. Now, just a slight segue here. One of the things that I talk about a lot on Civically Minded is the administrative or regulatory state. And what many people don't realize in the US is, you have your elected officials and they propose and they pass laws. But oftentimes embedded in these laws is the mandate that an agency be created or that this law be left to the governance of a regulatory agency. This could be at the federal, thank you, Beam Worthy. This could be at the federal, state, local level. And the regulatory agencies, these are the organizations that actually create what we call regulations. These are restrictions, or regulations have the force and effect of law, but they are not in point of fact made by elected officials. Instead, the people who are making these regulations are oftentimes appointees by the governor or a mayor or a federal or the president, or in some cases they're actually they may be employees. But the point is, these individuals are not elected officials, and yet these are the ones who are setting licensing standards. If you want to be in a profession that requires a license, they are setting the code of practice, the rules of practice. If you get in trouble with that licensing board or that regulatory agency, they can bring you up on charges. You could be looking at some pretty serious repercussions. Now, you do have a right of appeal, and you can go to the courts in some cases at some point, but they can mess with your career, your ability to earn a living. They're the ones that are making all these decisions, and people don't realize that much of your day-to-day life is being governed by non-elected people who have not been elected. Nobody even knows who they are. Now, many of these folks are good people. Don't get me wrong. They truly believe in what they're doing, but the level of accountability to the public is not where it is what you have with an elected official, such as that is. And the other thing that people don't realize is that if you have like a legislative, you have a regulatory board, say for any profession, any segment, oftentimes there is a consumer seat on those boards, or an interested person or a consumer, and you can try and get yourself into that seat. So if you want to get involved with the way your area, your country, your state, your municipality is operating, look into some of those regulatory boards for getting in. Also, these regulatory boards are supposed to be having open meetings.
Yep.
And most people who go to these meetings are people who are under discipline. They're not by that board. They're not really there. You don't have reporters there very frequently. You've got people who have business interests, but they're not attending these meetings. These are the meetings where you can monitor what's going on with that regulatory board and see how they're operating, see how they're doing things. How many times do they call an emergency session where they go behind closed doors?
Yep.
And make decisions that affect people. Watch, people who are going up and applying for licenses because they have to appear before the board because they have a criminal background, they have criminal convictions. See who gets licensed, see who doesn't get licensed.
Yep.
These are all like critical things that are going on in your community, and you don't see it, but it's important to understand that it's happening. So that's just my soapbox.
No, you're right. Because it was reminding me about the consumer protection advocates. You always have consumer protection advocates or advocacy or however you want to say it. And they are on a lot of these boards. And a lot of the times it's written in to the guidelines that they have to have somebody who is a part of that. And that way, when we try to say, well, what can I do? And everybody's focusing more on the overall arching things like trying to vote against senators and congressmen and aldermen and all those things like that, where you actually can have some impact. Maybe it might be on a smaller level in your own community, but honestly, all politics is local. So you should be focusing on your community anyway if you are going to do anything. But in these different things, if you can push against one bill here or there, or one regulation here or there, you can actually make differences. One of my advocacy that I was doing when I was still living in Kansas City is they had what was called a Ghostwriter Tax. That Ghostwriter Tax, what they were doing was for everybody who didn't pay their utility bills, they were going to take what was left, toss it all on the remaining customers and just add it on as an extra charge or bill. And they were having open meetings, and I got people, mustered together. We go out there. Eventually they start having them at like 2 a.m. and weird things like that.
Yep.
And you realize, well, why are they doing that? Because this is something important. And this is something that they know that, okay, enough attention has gotten to it that it can stop something nefarious that they might want to do. Now, granted, they eventually did, they had a snap meeting, and you know how they do those, where all of a sudden they say, we're going to have a meeting on this day. And you give them, they give a time frame, and they might say, well, to be announced roughly 8 p.m. Nobody ever shows up. And then when it starts getting to a point where everybody's starting to like leave at maybe 1 a.m, then they all just come in, bang the gavel, go on ahead and do everything and get the hell out of Dodge. And
that is something that impacts people's lives very directly. And they're able to get away with it. And in many cases, because people on those commissions are volunteers. They might be getting a per diem and expenses, but they're volunteers, and they can work around that. But you're right. And now, of course, with everything going online, virtual, well, then it becomes really easy for them to have one of those meetings. They don't even have to. They don't even have to. They're sitting there in their pajamas and their fuzzy slippers at 2 a.m, and then just hop back into bed. But I mean. But this is the kind of thing that happens that people just don't know that it's happening. I didn't understand.
The internet, it's so saturated. If they even put the notice up, you might not get that notice.
And also, you want to keep in mind that a lot of times you're trying to keep track of all this stuff. There are ways of doing it. There are services like LexisNexis, or
Hmm.
Westlaw that are tracking all this stuff for you. But you have to pay hundreds of dollars a month for these
Yeah.
services. I mean, you can do things manually, but it's not easy. And the one thing that I'm hoping for Hard Lens is that eventually we get the money together as an organization so that we can get into some of these databases and really do a better job of keeping people up to date of what's happening. But we just don't have the resources, and it's the big newsrooms who can do it, but they're not capable of doing it either because they've lost all their local
Well,
journalists.
they don't want to do it.
They don't
They're
want to do it.
capable. They're capable, but they don't want to do it because it's often blowback to them.
Yeah.
And some people might think, well, how is that blowback? Well, for instance, that Ghostwriter Tax, who do you guys think is one of the major sponsors for the local news? Sometimes it's your local gas and power companies.
It is, yeah.
And so if they're the ones who are putting money into keeping that news agency afloat, then they might decide, yeah, we can let that go.
Yeah.
And that's some of the things that these people definitely do. That's the reason why people a lot of times they talk about bureaucracy, and they use this bureaucracy to hide behind all the things, and they make these nefarious things sound very mundane, and it's just paperwork or whatever. And this is where they get you. This is or that saying, that old saying, the devil is in the details.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's hilarious to me.
It is. It is, and I think that then people, I think, eventually become indifferent because they can't keep up with it. They feel helpless, and there's learned helplessness
Yep.
that happens, and then people feel helpless, and they stop. They just stop, and I can't say that I blame them. I understand it, but the thing is that I think that's one of the things that I'm hoping to try to do, at least on a small level, is encouraging people to, if you can't follow everything, but there
Nope.
might be that one thing that you can do,
Mm-hmm.
and just do that, get involved with that, and do that, and lift that up. And that will, if anything, give you a better sense of control so that you just don't withdraw completely.
Well, that's exactly what I think. I mean, there's a couple of different things where I understand why people get, a feeling of, okay, well, what can I do? And this is part of the goal. This is the reason why, like on the political matrix, we talk about the elites so much. I focus on the elites. Now I know people will say, well, they're not elite, they're this, and they want to use semantical terms. We're talking about the people who basically control and run everything. And when you have this level of wealth, you're able to micro target everything down to this level. You're able to say, you know what, I need to make sure that I put my hand on the scale, get this person in the office, make sure that these people, if they do get in the office, that they're neutralized and they can't do much. And then I need to make sure that I get this corporation, and so all of this stuff is literally being lined up. It's not like this is just all some coincidence how these things work. And I know we'll look at a Elon Musk. Well, okay, Elon Musk has to have a corporation somewhere. So that means that somebody is living in proximity to that corporation and dealing with the regulations of that corporation. And it's the same thing with wastewater plants, coal power plants, the whole the water stuff like that was going on with Flint, and which goes on in South Carolina, Denmark, South Carolina, and also plenty of places across Texas with the fracking. All of these things, if their goal is to keep you busy. And I tell people all the time, I honestly believe that that's where the two income trap came in back from the 60s. They noticed that, wait a minute, we got a bunch of people out here complaining about the war. We got a bunch of women out here saying that they need more rights. We have, gay people, LGBTQ community out here. They're giving us hell saying that they need more rights. We got all of these different issues going on. We got Black Power movements. We got so many things going on. And they're like, okay, the elites, I believe, this is just a theory. I can't necessarily prove it, although evidence kind of looks like it's pointing that way, that they decided we need to raise inflation on people. And if you look at what happened with like some of the stuff that happened in the Middle East shortly after that, and you start seeing oil prices going sky high, and this, anybody who I know who's around in the 70s, I'm a little younger than that. I'm 41, Lainie.
Okay.
But in the 70s, anybody who's maybe 10 years older than me is definitely going to know about the gas lines.
Oh yeah.
And so all
Yep.
of that
Oh
led
yeah.
to mass inflation after that. And a lot of people don't know this. A lot of solar technology was already invented and was starting to be implemented at that time. Carter literally had solar panels on the White House, which Reagan came and ripped all that stuff off and started tearing apart a lot of those policies. And that goes into George Bush and who killed the electric car. And I can go on a tangent. But
Right.
all of those things I felt led to putting us in a form of a two-income household. And it doesn't matter if it's, you know, a husband and a wife, or you're gay or a lesbian couple, or if you're two brothers decide we need to move in together, or, you know, a group of families. Their goal was to raise everything, you know, as far as inflation, and keep wages low enough that you have to spend more time working.
Yeah.
And if you're doing more time working, you can't be out fighting and protesting all of these things that are being done.
You know, I think there's something to it. I want to say Elizabeth Warren even wrote a book about that, the two income
Yep.
trap, something like
Yes, she
that.
did.
And she did. And you know, the other thing that you all who follow me on Civically Minded have heard me talk about is degree inflation, where we started seeing again the push to essentially, if you wanted any kind of a desk job, you were going to need to pursue higher education. And you started seeing people in fields that never
Yep.
needed a college degree. Suddenly, you can't even get a foot into in the door of an interview unless you have a college degree. And again, I am, you know, I don't like the fact that college degrees, liberal arts educations were inaccessible to many people for a long time. I think that's bad. Okay, I'm not saying that should have been happening, so on the basis of race, of class, of sex. But what I think has been painted as an egalitarian move to get everybody into college or college education, I think it's covering up for something else. And that is, first of all, you're making it harder for people to get get into many types of careers, professional careers, or management or business careers. But you're also delaying their entry into the workforce, sometimes, but you know, by many years when you do that, which means less earnings, less earning power, less savings. But then
More
you,
debt.
of course, more debt, and then then you're jacking up the price of a college education to the point where eventually even middle class families, families that should have been, you know, that a couple decades before would have been just fine, are not able to afford to send their child to get even a 4-year degree, never mind the advanced degrees like medical degrees, legal degrees,
Legal.
and that sort of thing. And then you started seeing also the increase in requiring graduate degrees, again, for jobs that had previously only required a bachelor or even an associate's degree. So so I think that there was a lot going on there. And when you look at the common denominator, there is this sense of there is that, again, the mammon, the money, and that people don't function well when they're constantly strapped for cash. I will even go so far as to say, and I've talked about this on the show as well, is if you look at why marriages fall apart, why relationships fall apart, statistically, when you ask people, and this has been going on for as long as I can remember, financial disagreements, money stress is what causes marriages to collapse. It can even keep people from wanting to get married because they're concerned about finances and hitching their horse to somebody's wagon if that person has debt or does not make a lot of money. So you've also seen marriages and families collapsing under the weight of financial stress. So it all seems very, very obvious to me, or very clear to me, that since nobody is bothering to do anything about this financial stress that is causing great harm to people, that obviously it is serving somebody's purposes.
I mean, and I completely agree with all those sentiments, and I've been looking at all that. And like I say, I'm more pessimistic than most. Beam earlier was saying, don't embrace sweet apathy, Lainie. It's like I'm ambiguously ambivalent about that. I believe that this is coordinated, and this goes also back into my faith. I do believe that um, all of these things are, you know, are preordained. I do believe that there is in prophecy, and I believe all of these things are working to a specific end goal. Not necessarily end, but to a certain point. And so when I look at some of the stuff which the elites are doing as far as how they're manifesting this system, like I tell people all the time, like earlier you said, well, some of these people are good people. Well, this is how they do this. They compartmentalize so that they can
Yep.
get good people to do things that are not good because they don't internalize the negatives or the
Right.
harm that they're actually accruing on people. And perfect example in the military, your job might be you're a corpsman. All you're doing is dealing with helping somebody who's sick or injured or whatever. Well, some of the people who you might be actually working on might be somebody who's going in to actually do something nefarious. You don't realize that by helping a negative person, you're actually harming others in
Mhm.
that grand process. Or you can say, for instance, like part of my job in the military, I moved weapons. I was a weapon specialist. If I'm moving weapons around, those weapons are getting used, correct?
Mhm.
And
Yep.
so I'm being a part of a war machine and helping enact God knows what on various different countries because you don't know all the times where that munitions is going and what it's going to be used for, if it's for defensive, if it's for aggressive. You don't know those things. And the same way, all the way up and down, like our government, certain politicians might be only focused on, say, housing, discrimination and things like that. And they're being given a bill a lot of times by people like Alec and K Street and stuff like that. And they're told, hey, this thing you need for this housing thing that's going to help, these hundreds of thousands of people. The only way you're going to get it done is you got to agree on this other thing, which they barely know anything about. And so they're able to go in and rubber stamp it and get that vote. And that's the reason why we have a Congress who passes maybe one or two good things while they're passing 10 other horrible things at the same time. I mean, it's all by design.
Yeah, yeah, and I think you touch on something here, and that you have people in institutions or machines, as you put it,
Hmm.
and at some point there's the question of, um, okay, they're complicit. They're complicit because they're
At a
part of
certain
this
level, you
at a
you have
certain
to be.
level. But at the same time, there's the other question. I struggle with this a lot.
Hmm.
Is okay. Do you want to remove all the decent people from that institution? If you do that, then can all kinds of evil run amok? And I don't think there's one answer. I genuinely
There's
don't
not.
think there's one answer because one option is okay, if you do remove the decent people, not necessarily good people, but the decent people out of there, there's the possibility that the machine could collapse. That
Yeah.
when you've got only self-interested people or people who are outright evil, then they start making war on each other, and the whole thing could collapse. Not always a bad thing, could be painful, but it could happen. But then there's the other point that as long as the decent people stay there, it continues to prop up that institution. I don't have an answer in every single case, but it is, I think, something that we need to confront.
Well, I would put that's almost like the Saddam Hussein question. Saddam Hussein was definitely, basically doing a lot of things in concert with the U.S. government. He, for a long time, was on our payroll, getting weapons
Hmm.
from us directly, and he was in good favor to us because of he was helping control oil access and different things like that, and subdue certain nations we wanted to keep subdued, and he was fulfilling a role. When it got to a point when he was no longer felt to be fulfilling that role, some people felt like, well, it makes more sense to just get him out of there. Well, you get him out of there, But now, what situation are you looking at in Iraq as the cause of losing him? Granted, he was not a benevolent guy, and don't get me
No.
wrong, anybody. I am not saying he was a good guy, but what you do have is when you don't also understand the nuances in religion, like we were talking about, you don't understand the difference between a Sunni, a Shiite. You don't understand the Baathists who are in there. You don't understand a moderate Muslim
Right.
or the extremists. And when you don't understand these internal policies that go on, you can basically unleash Pandora's box. And I believe, though, all of the elites across the board, all are evil. Let's just put that out. I believe they all are. I do believe, like George Carlin said, there is a club that most of us are not in, and they are going to only allow a certain level of rising in their system
True.
before you're checked. It's kind of like you can do all of this and all that. It's kind of for those video game people out there, I'll give you guys a reference. Grand Theft Auto. You have like these stars when you're committing all these little crimes in the game. And as long as you're doing like, you yank somebody out of a car, do this, do that, then when you might have a mission where you got to rob a bank. You rob the bank, okay, your star goes up a little bit. But okay, the cop comes out. You shoot up 15 cop cars. In the game, people, we're not talking about literally shooting cop cars. But that happens and your stars keep going up. And so I look at the elites like that. The more you look like you're a possibility of changing the order or causing a problem, a couple of things are going to happen. Either they're going to run enough negative press to discredit you and push you out of the way. The other option is let you rise up and then find a way to marginalize you and put you into a corner so you're kind of irrelevant, like a Bernie Sanders. Or what they do sometimes, and I don't know how often this is done, but sometimes I believe that they might even plan a scandal to make sure, or not even plan a scandal. There might, because all of us have
the leverage one. I mean, we all have our issues. I mean, here we go. But yeah, but the point is that they're going to leverage something. I think a lot of these folks,
they can tear any of us down.
They can tear you down
because we're all
and
imperfect. We all have something.
And I think that what happens also is that I'm just saying, we need to be wise as serpents and gentle as doves. There's no reason to be unpleasant or anything like that and to do good to each other. But we have to be wise as serpents because we have to keep in mind that if you are a decent person, okay, and I'm not saying that means you're a great person or a saint. It means that you are a decent person who tries to behave in good faith. You don't necessarily see how some people act or behave. You're assuming that your motivations, the way you interact, is the way other people are interacting, the way they are motivated. And so you can't see how other people might be willing to use you, how they might be willing to manipulate you. And they've gone ahead and as being worthy says, we all have our vices, our scandals. They may be willing to use you to manipulate you, and will have no problem, as you said, checking you, putting you in your place, even taking you out.
Yes.
And you don't see it until it's too late. You're incapable of seeing what's going on. And sometimes it's your own ego. And there's nothing wrong with that. We all have an ego and we all want to be self-protective. But you can't, that will keep you from seeing what's happening until it's too late. And that, you're right. Yeah.
That I agree, and I honestly tell people they want to know what's the relevance of the Julian Assange stuff. I mean, not Julian Assange, but the Epstein stuff and the Maxwell. That's what that's going into on a high level, concentrating all of these people's vices and different things as a way of control. And all it is I believe towards closer and closer towards the end days, we'll get more and more peeks into what's going on at the top. And I feel like that's what we're seeing in a sense. We're starting to see the masses slip more and more and because even throughout different societies, as you look at history, every society as it goes through a certain amount of time, the the people who are at the top who pass it down to the next generation, the next generation, the next generation, they get a little bit lazier, they get a little bit more careless every generation. And what happens is eventually the things which they were doing to keep their societies up and running and strong and being the number one hegemonies, eventually, because of the deterioration of the mentality and the thinking and customs, all that stuff within those nations led to the end of those nations. I mean, you can look back to the Sumerians, you can look back to the Babylonians, you can look at the Persians, you can look at the Medes, you can look at the Greeks, you can look at the multiple iterations of the Roman Empire, and then look at when you had the Spanish Armada and Empire rise, and to the British rise, and then when you had the French rise under Napoleon Bonaparte, and then how that fell to the American hegemony. And so all of these different things, if you look internally in these problems, which how these nations rise and fall, it's all the same kind of thing which goes on. The longer they sit at power, the more comfortable they get, the more sloppier they get, and then they eventually start leading to their own demise.
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel that that's, I talk a little bit about this on Hard Lens, not too much, but I feel that's where we're at with the American Empire. I mean, I think that we had an experiment. This is, first of all, it's a very young country.
Yes.
It's an experiment, and it got off on the wrong foot. I think we can all acknowledge that. I mean, you have something that was the impulse to colonize. Look, people move around. That I absolutely understand, but the urge to colonize. There had already been that pre-colonization, that contact that took place, which unfortunately led to the death of so many indigenous people due to differences in immunities. Now, that wasn't intentional, but it certainly it destroyed.
Well, some of it was intentional.
It could have been, and there were major immunity differences because of the way domestic animals are.
A lot of people don't know that they did this. They used to actually take the blankets and put them on diseased animals, and then pass those blankets out to native tribes.
Yeah, and there was that too, but there was also the initial contact. I mean, that was I think unfortunately going to happen, which is why I know in South America there are no contact rules now, because there are still some tribes, for example, in the Amazon that are very vulnerable to the common cold and chicken pox. But then you have people who come in and say, well, we're just going to colonize your nation, because they didn't understand the ways, or they did understand, didn't care. I mean, there was that too, because they wanted to grab that land. Then you go ahead and you engage in the transatlantic slave trade, which I consider to be the greatest human rights atrocity that has ever been committed. And when I say that, I am not in any way minimizing the other human atrocities that have taken place by any means, and we've had some horrific ones. But what happened there, and there it is. And now we wonder why we have social problems. Well, you don't do this to people. One of the points I wanted to make is that when I was in seminary, my advisor, as a young man, as a young scholar, he did interview some formerly enslaved people. So that gives you an idea of just actually how recent that was. Yeah. And then, of course, you had the sharecropping, and that certainly happened to both black and white.
My grandparents were sharecroppers.
Yeah, and what happened there, and so, which was its own form of debt slavery when it came down to it. And then you had indentured servitude, which is not the same, but also had some pretty serious ramifications. So you're wondering why, you have bad feelings, why you have traumatized populations, why you have populations that, you have all this happening. So now we're reaping that, but we're reaping it at a time where there has been an explosion of wealth, technology, resources, which have steadily trickled up on top. And so, my feeling is that we are at the ragged edge or end of the American empire.
Yeah. And
now we're coming up against some serious climate issues, which, by the way, are bigger than any of us. We've got a depletion of petroleum resources. We've got all kinds of emerging pandemics and but possible diseases and infections. Plus, we have what we've inherited here in the U.S. and of course around the world because of our fingers in pies, a whole lot of problems. And this is what we're dealing with right now. That we could actually decide to, there was the possibility, I think, at some point of saying, okay, we need to work on this. We need to figure out ways to come together and take care of each other and mitigate some of this. I don't see that happening.
Yeah.
And if you look at the work of Octavia E. Butler in Parable of the Sower, Parable of the Talents, those books, I think, she flat out said, I'm seeing this as, as something that could happen. I'm not saying it will happen. I'm not, but this could happen. However, if you read her books, you begin to realize how much has actually happened and is happening already. And I'm seeing this country going into some very bad places.
Yeah.
I'm walking around Chicago, and I'm walking in one of our very nice neighborhoods, not fancy neighborhood, but a really great neighborhood. And part of the park has been turned into a tent city. We're seeing tent cities all over the city. In some cases, in some of the most affluent areas of Chicago, we are seeing tent cities. And
it's like that here too, in out here in California.
Yeah,
Hollywood,
and I don't remember that. We always, and if you look, there's a book that I would like to recommend to people. It's out of print, but it's easy to purchase on Amazon or any place else. It's called The Tyranny of Kindness by Theresa Funnicello, and she was a welfare rights advocate. And this was written before welfare reform happened in the mid 90s. So this was written before that, but it was describing the old welfare system. And she has a whole chapter on that. I think it's the creation and manufacture of homeless people. And she talks about how that was very carefully created by people in the powers that be to create homeless people. And now, of course, we've got the elites will actually come down and tell us if you complain about the fact that your park has been taken over by people who are using it for a purpose for which it was not intended. Now you're the bad person. And that way they can ignore the problem by saying, if you go ahead and complain about this, you are the bad person. Meanwhile, they have their own backyards. They have their own resources for recreation. And there it goes. And then, of course, if you're alderman, which has happened here in this city, if you call up the alderman's office, you get shamed for complaining. No, people stop calling because they don't like being shamed. And then the alderman can say, well, I'm not getting any complaints. It's all very convenient. But it's on the back. It's on the backs of some extremely vulnerable people, most of whom are severely mentally ill, many of whom have severe disabilities and substance abuse issues for which there are no services.
Well, and think about it. Why do we have a nation with so much substance abuse? It's because a lot of people are trying to escape from this reality that they're in. And so if you're a person who you're not going to do it in a violent manner or trying to push back, and you know what? So what if I want to use some kind of substance to kind of get my mind to escape from this? Because this is the only way to escape from these captivities. Then that's what people do. And then you're demonized for that on top of it, going into a lot of the mass incarceration stuff. And I got to remember to ask you to that book again. And that way I can remember, because I want to order and read it. Because I always like to read those different, viewpoints on stuff like that. But it reminds me a lot of what I read about the Muck Breakers. They believe that they need to always have a class which is at the bottom. And I believe as the world is going more towards globalization, the goal has been, well, America, I know you guys have been having it good, but in order for things to be balanced out, you guys who have been having it good are going to have to drop your standard of living. And when I'm talking about that, I'm talking about the 90% of us below, not even that whole full 10%, because some of them they're not going to change, but the rest of us need to drop it down a couple of standards. So if you're upper middle class, you need to be ready to be more middle class. If you're already in the poverty, if you gotta build up a new Hooverville or Bidenville, then that's just the reality, and accept that. And the excuse is going to be, well, there's poverty in all these other countries over here, so are you too good for poverty? I mean,
yeah, exactly. You know, golly, you want food? You want to live in a house with walls?
it's
Boy,
like,
you think pretty
you
highly
damn
of
snob,
yourself, don't you?
you damn snob. And what I try to get across to people is, a lot of people, they focus on communism or socialism or being Democrats or liberals or conservatives, and I tell people all of these things are just tools that are used by the elites to keep people put into certain categories, to give you the illusion of what you're fighting for, you're getting some kind of benefit or accomplishment from it. And unless you're in certain classes, you're not really feeling any of this stuff in any kind of a positive way. Most of it is just a small taking away from you. Now, depending on who you are, let's say you have $100 in your wallet and somebody takes a quarter. You might not feel that quarter as much. But if you only got 50 cents in your wallet and they take that quarter, you feel that quarter. And I feel that's more or less what's going on with our whole economy across the board. It's a small taking away, little by little, and it's happening on a global scale. Now, some countries are feeling it more intensely than others, but I feel that's what's going on everywhere as a whole. And this is all by design, because I myself do not believe that any of these governments really have any actual control. They can control certain things, and a lot of this is on autopilot and has been on autopilot for quite some time, especially on the national levels. They've just worked over probably the last maybe 40 to 50 years on getting down into like the actual mayor levels and city councils and things like that to having more control. But I believe that there are groups who are literally, when we start talking about the World Economic Forum, the Davos, the Bilderbergs, and other people who I'm not going to say right now who I believe are higher up that chain, because I do not believe World Economic Forum or Davos is really running anything. They're just a mouthpiece or something shiny for people to look at and blame, oh, Klaus Schwab is doing all this. No, Klaus Schwab is a secretary to these people who are really putting this stuff in. I mean, especially you start looking into like even Elon Musk and Peter Thiel, and start looking into Zuckerberg and the real origins of Facebook and all these stuff like that. And you'll start seeing a lot of this stuff has government funding into it. So the government was literally picking winners and losers in who is going to be propped up and run these things. I mean, you look at it with the oil companies, why they're the most profitable companies on earth, yet they still get massive subsidies and all these protections. Yet there's no subsidies or protections for any renewables and things like that. And that also goes into little conspiracy warning here. But I brought up about one of the victims in the Buffalo shooting, how he was working on a water-powered hydrogen car.
Right, I remember hearing about that.
And so the three people who have come up with something that literally would take trillions of dollars instantly away from very elite people would literally make a lot of these natural gas stuff just mute. Unimportant. And I mean, think about it. Everybody knows all the gas stations we see around, all the refineries, all of that stuff would be gone. A lot of this gas motors and stuff like that would have to be reinstituted. So if you have all these massive corporations, and this is what they bank on, also it would put a huge dampening into natural coal. So when you have all of these things, and you're literally talking about somebody could come up with an invention where they can literally use some water and literally take trillions of dollars away from people, not to mention the positive effects that that would have for climate change as an overall whole. I don't think it's too crazy for anybody out there who believes that there's more smoke to it. Now, of course, I'm just putting it out there. Just want to declare, I'm just putting it out there for everybody. So we're always thinking about this, because I do not put anything past the people who would do some of the stuff they do, especially when I've heard elites say stuff like, if I could die and be reborn, I would like to be a virus so I can kill as many people as possible. I mean, I can't remember which prince said that, but this is the level that these people, all the way the ultra top. We have to understand they think like this.
Yeah. You know, I just, you kind of, yes, I mean, that was awesome. And on Thursday, I was reporting on product shrinkage. What's been going on is that to deal with so-called inflation, some companies, consumer product companies, are, for example, slightly shrinking the quantity of goods that are in a package. So you might have a few extra cookies in a package, something like that, so they can keep the price the same, but you're actually getting less of the product. And I was saying, first of all, it doesn't particularly concern me, but there are families where, having that lack of an ounce, or those few less tissues, at some point they're tapped out. As you point out, somebody steals a quarter from you when you got $100 in your wallet, not a big deal. When you got $1 in your wallet, that's a problem. Mm-hmm. And that when you start taking away, for many people, at least for now, they're not going to feel that pinch, but there are people who are feeling that pinch already at the bottom. And as people start falling further down to the bottom, that pinch, the squeeze is going to get a lot tighter on people. And that absolutely concerns me at this point. But the other thing that people have been trying to point out, and Roger Meadows, he's one of our great people who supports hard lenses.
I see Roger's name a lot all over the place.
Yeah, he's awesome. But one of the things he points out is that this is the problem with allowing public companies to go public stockholders, because you have the company. They're not even necessarily trying to meet the needs of their own executives or even the owners. Now it's the stockholders, the shareholders, who they're trying to they're trying to appease. So any profits that they're making isn't even necessarily going to the people who founded the company, the managers, the executives, and certainly not the rank and file employee. They want to appease the shareholders. Yep. And is that really the way we want to live? The one thing I've said so many times is, do we want to promote just people acquiring wealth, or do we want a community prosperity? We could move from trying to just take over and exert power and making some people rich toward everybody living what would be considered by any standard a prosperous life, a prosperous way of living. People would have homes and food and education and medical care and public facilities. That is possible, and it's been possible, or it was possible for a while. But we missed. It could be possible, but it's not happening.
Well, I say it's possible as in, like somebody can walk. Yes, they can walk. Are they going to? Is it going to do that? And I believe that the powers that be that control the system and keep things the way that they're going to go have decided this is the course that they want to do. And it's one thing if I'm sitting here with you, Lainie, and I have Chris with me, and let's say I have Franco, and the four of us are all sitting together and trying to come up with solutions on how we're going to do things. And we have ultimate power to be able to do these solutions. And then it makes a difference if I say, I'm going to cut out the other three of you guys, and I'm just going to make all the solutions, and I'm only going to weigh on what I think. And that's what we have. We have a group think by a small minority. So if you're only that small group and you're deciding, okay, well, this is how things need to work or not, you don't even put in the possibility of all the different ways where you can actually make these things happen. And so if you've been a group of people who, and I wanted to touch back on what you said about the transatlantic slave trade. I believe that a lot of the numbers and things like that, which when they talk about it, are completely well below what I believe the actual totality was of it. I mean, I think they said it's roughly 12 million. If you look up the Google answer is 12 million enslaved. I believe the number was much higher than that. If you just look at the population of, say, Brazil, for instance, Brazil had the highest amount of slaves come out of West Africa. and the amount of Brazilians, or so-called Black Brazilians, who are down there, just on doing the numbers on population growth, it doesn't add up to only 12 million that you see. And you start going throughout the Americas, Puerto Rico, Cuba, Dominica, all these different areas, and then you start thinking about the east coast of the Americas, and then the Caribbean. When you start factoring in, it doesn't add up. And then you factor in the amount of genocide which happened throughout the whole, from north to south part of the Americas, the impact from the transatlantic slave trade. And a lot of people don't think about, not only slaves were going to the Americas, slaves were going to Europe also. There were ones who were going to all parts of Europe. Now, the transatlantic slave trade, you don't have a lot of those who are going to Eastern Europe, but that doesn't mean Eastern Europe didn't have their hand to play in it also, because if you go a couple of centuries before that, well, not even a couple of centuries, maybe about a century, you have what's called the sub-Saharan slave trade, which that on record number is about 17 million, which those slaves were going through Eastern Europe and into Asia. And believe it or not, a lot of them actually led to helping build the Wall of China. So
I'd be surprised, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the totality of the story of the extraction, which went on out of just the continent of Africa, some of that perpetrated by certain tribes in Africa against other tribes, some of that perpetrated by other continents. But and the reason why I think the transatlantic slave trade, and I don't want to take away from, there was slavery that happened all throughout Europe. There's slavery that's happened in every nation amongst other Europeans to other Europeans, other Asians to other Asians. Why the transatlantic slave trade, and I'll say the sub-Saharan, was so brutal is when you had whole entire continents which were preying on a whole entire other continents. I mean, I think it's bad if you have a dysfunctional relationship at home, but I would prefer you guys take care of what you got at home instead of exporting your problems and extrapolating problems onto a whole bunch of other people who have nothing to do with you. And that's why it's so bad.
Yeah, well, it's racism. I mean, it's racism. I mean, look, and this is where I tend to, in some cases, will kind of back off from some Marxists or socialists. I do believe we need to look at class. I think that class is incredibly important, and failure to take that into consideration in its own right is in economics and financial prosperity and poverty has to be addressed. But I believe that racism is, I mean, obviously it is real in the sense that you have perhaps a human tendency to notice difference and want to be with your, to have a preference for your own so-called tribe. But that gets taken in a very evil direction.
Yeah.
It's an extremely evil direction where you then dehumanize. This is not just a person from another who's different. This is a person who is less than human. And I think that cannot be dismissed. It should not be minimized. And I think,
well, that's what I mean, that you bring that up. That's what made the transatlantic slave trade different than all the other ones, because this is one where specifically there was an actual hatred towards the people, and it was, everything about it was orchestrated through like a stripping of culture, stripping of names, stripping of everything, down to you literally, that's why it's called chattel, because it's looked at as like cattle, like an animal. It wasn't, and there's different versions of slavery. I'm not saying all of it was great, but I'm saying the stuff that happened along with, like the sub-Saharan, you did have a lot of where they, I can't think of the word right now, chop below the bottom, castration. You had a lot of that in turning people into to eunuchs. But the transatlantic slave trade, the barbary of so much of it, I don't think, like, I remember I was telling people about gator bait. It's like literally they would like take babies, throw them out there to try to catch alligators. They would literally like cut women's stomachs open and just stomp the baby as it came out of her body. I mean, there's stuff that just And it's not like it was a one-off thing
Yeah.
here. It's just
Yeah.
like, you know, I mean, thousands and tens of thousands of stories documented on it. And then when you start looking into the transatlantic slavery, sorry, I guess my phone's ringing somewhere. Hold on one.
Hey, folks. I don't know if I think I am still live, so it's good to see everybody. It's a fun conversation. You don't get to have these kind of conversations that often.
Sorry, that was my
No.
young co-host was giving me a call.
Oh, no worries. No worries. I was just talking to folks.
Yeah, but I don't think people realize, like, honestly, even if you look into the etymology of words and naming, you can see the racism as clear as day. And when I deal with some of these libertarians and conservatives, they like to bring it, well, why don't you guys just have two-parent households and this and that, and then you guys could do it. And it's like, you don't, it's completely dismissing all of the different steps and levels to continuously make an effort to keep a group of people down.
Yeah. And people do not operate well under continued and persistent and increasing levels of stress and trauma. And so there it is. And that's when I brought up, for example, the whole issue with the financial pressures, and how they consistently is a number one predictor of divorce and family dissolution and family problems.
Mm-hmm.
And when you consider that there were very explicit efforts made in the United States to keep Black families from owning homes.
Yes.
Owning real estate. And when you consider also that, and I don't necessarily agree with this, but the reality is that in the United States, at least, owning real estate is what was historically the surest path to developing wealth.
Exactly.
You buy your starter home, you work up, you buy this, and then when you're ready to retire, you sell the big home, move into a small one. Now you've got the chunk of cash. You can pass that on to your kids and live off of it. But Chicago is a prime example of how this happened. And that there were groups of people who were explicitly messed with and not permitted to get that piece of the pie for themselves. And that happened. So I tend to be, when we talk about two-parent homes, I'm all about two-parent homes, and I could talk about that at great length. But that requires a significant level of economic, political, and social support that is not there. It is certainly not been there, in my view, for much of the Black community. And it's less and less so even for the white community now. And now white people are sitting here saying, oh, wait a minute.
Well, yeah, I mean,
which is actually getting kind of funny, is watching white people say, yeah, there you go.
It's funny to me because I've always looked at what has been going on with the Black, brown, and Native communities, and all of these atrocities have been going on for so long. Now, granted, you can have an area like California, which is going to give you, it's different because California, this is how things are going on, and there's opportunities and all that, but you're negating the reality for a lot of people in most of the rest of the country. Only focus on California. And I deal with that a lot of times dealing with people out here, because like the area I live in is easily a 90, I would say probably 96% Hispanic or Latino area.
Okay.
And even if that's white or Black, so there's not as much discrimination towards a Hispanic person, because your cops are Hispanic, your judges are Hispanic, your lawyers are Hispanic. Right. So you're not seeing that strife, which if they lived in the area I grew up in, Kansas City, where you're living in a state where the state is 90-something% white, the county you might live in might be, a lot more diverse. Like, I think the population at the time when I was growing up was about 32% Black, about like maybe 20% Hispanic or Latino, about another probably 10% Native, and then like maybe 5% Asian, and then the rest is white. So within Kansas City, you have that diversity. But when you're dealing with, especially the state of Kansas is like 96% white, you feel a difference the moment you walk out there. And you notice a difference because all of your, even though you still have that makeup, your legislators are predominantly all white.
Okay.
And so you're getting a different feel than somebody out here in California is necessarily getting. They don't have somebody who, you don't have somebody who's representing you who even close to understands any of the stuff you're going through. And like I tell people, I mean, we have what is it, Juneteenth coming up soon. My grandparents basically were kids when all that stuff was going on, so their parents actually had to survive that. So imagine if you've went through slavery, you've went through sundown towns, you've went through Jim Crow, you start trying to build yourself back up, and then you have all of that ripped away, and then have to start back over again.
Right.
and then not to mention, you know, you have more Jim Crow laws came after that, and then you segregation and so if you're always fighting against a government that's against you, and I tell people all the time, you can have a white person here and there, and you can have large numbers of white people who are like, you know what, I don't think that way. I'm not going to do that. I wouldn't do that. I believe that's wrong. That doesn't negate what the government is doing, though.
It doesn't negate history. It doesn't
Yeah.
negate history. I mean, that, you know, I think that one thing that what you can say is, okay, a white person or a person, any decent person can sit here and say, look, my choices today, what I participate in today, are going to impact generations to come. So I need to make decisions here. But it doesn't negate the fact that there's a whole set of history. You can't just say, okay, now we're just going to put you, you're right here at the starting line, you know, at the starting line. You can just go right on
Yeah.
ahead without considering how far back from the starting line and that a person is. So you know, again, it may be that a white person is going to say, yeah, I don't think that way, or I don't want to think that way. But that does not negate the history, which
Yeah.
is why, you know, and yet we continue to see policies being implemented that make it just that much more difficult for people to get ahead. We saw what happened, for example, we saw with welfare reform in the 90s, which in some cases complicated matters. We've got skyrocketing homelessness. Nobody has really gotten their handle on the homelessness crisis, why it happens, how it happens. You've got the student loan issue with the fact that a certain administration decided to make it very difficult to discharge student loans in bankruptcy, including private student loans, not even government student loans, and have made it very difficult for people to get jobs unless they have higher education, even though previously people were able to do those jobs without those jobs. So you've got all that happening at the same time. And so that's just actually adding on to the economic stress that many people find themselves under. There's been nothing there to help support or nurture the rebuilding of communities, psyches, and it's actually things have been, as far as I'm concerned, exacerbated by these decisions. They haven't improved it for anybody. There are certain groups in this country, including people who have always been in poverty, regardless of race. But you're talking about the Black community, the Indigenous community, the Latino community, and the white community.
Rural community.
Rural community is, you know, I used to live in a small town in rural Oregon. I did that temporarily. It was a lot of fun. But I saw a level of poverty there. And by the way, virtually everybody was white. I saw a level of poverty there that I did not know existed in this country. I've never seen that level of poverty or cultural deprivation. A lack of services. The libraries were defunded. The police were defunded. The sheriff's department was defunded. Everything was defunded in these areas. We had a gun and ammo shop. You know, but you know, it was
gun ammo. What was it? Probably gun ammo, post office, convenience store, and a library.
Actually, it wasn't. Actually, it wasn't. It was kind of interesting. They had their own gun and ammo. That we had a library, but that had been defunded, and it was running primarily on volunteer labor. There was a DMV, and we had a post office until somebody burned it down after we lost any kind of law enforcement in the area, because that was defunded. It was insane. But what I'm going to say is that, you know, that's starting to happen at this point, I believe. That the kind of economic pressure, and now I think that there are a lot of white people, I suspect, those who are willing to be honest with ourselves, who said, maybe we should have spotted all this a long time ago. We could have prevented this trajectory. And now, and it's sad, it's unfortunate.
Mhm.
And but again, reaping what you've sown.
Yeah. Well,
Whether you knew you were sowing it or not.
And what it is and what I've noticed is you've always had this in the black and brown community. It's been going on like at a crazy rate, and then you've had it to a degree in the white communities. But what has happened is now it's starting to be exported to anybody who's middle class and below.
Yeah.
It's starting to get into that club, and so everybody's starting to get to experience what we've experienced for centuries.
Yeah.
And I feel like the last 30 years is where that's been that change when we start going into globalization. I'm going to read one of these comments real quick. Kahani says, if it was South Africa, I was going to think it was load shedding. Be very happy if you don't know what it is, which I don't know, but thank you. Here's the response. It was the same in South Africa before 1994. Black people were not allowed to have things like life insurance and own real estate. And I mean, that's the reason why I've been trying to have more of these conversations. And my goal, especially on this channel, is to speak to people outside of the US to get firsthand takes and perspectives and have actual individual conversations and not necessarily be focused on the hot topic that's going on in the media. And that's how I feel like I'm learning more and more of what's going on. And shout out to Shadow. I see my brother Shadow Band in the building. Baba says there was no generational wealth for minorities. They have never really been able to pass down anything, let alone a house. Exactly.
Yep.
House is where most of your wealth comes from.
Yeah, and it is. That's the way you got started. And they had, various programs to help white people get those homes, and you could do that. And then you had, of course, you had the restrictive covenants and the land contract.
You brought up restrictive covenants. Have you seen them?
I know very little, but I've been hearing about them in different areas.
You gotta see them.
Yeah. And so there was all that going on, and it's funny because we were just talking about this. I have a friend, very dear friend, solidly middle class, stay-at-home mom, married to an attorney, a reasonably successful attorney. They did everything right. They were very prudent. They have always lived below their means. They bought a home that was, not ostentatious, but a solid home. They have 2 daughters, and both daughters have type 1 diabetes, which means that they are dependent on insulin. And of course, I'm sure you know about the scandal of insulin costs in this country. And this was actually probably going back now 5 years ago. My friend pointed out to me that with their insurance and covering premiums plus all of the costs for diabetic supplies that are not covered under the insurance, the out-of-pocket care, and this was like 5 years ago or so, the out-of-pocket care for both of their daughters is about $35,000 a year. And that is with insurance. And what she's pointed out to me is she said that her husband, a tax attorney, he knows his numbers. He worked it out that if he were to lose his job or something were to happen which would keep them from having insurance, they would probably be bankrupt within 2 years. Now, there are some children's insurance programs that exist, but this gives you an idea of what the kind of squeeze that's on people of actually significant, who have historically had a lot of significant privilege in this country. That's the kind of squeeze that's happening right now and is continuing to happen. And it is born of a bunch of policies that didn't affect us for a long time. And now that they are, some people are squealing. Some people are putting their head in the sand. So,
and I would say thank you for that correction, Kanye. Anybody out here, I do like to try to address people by their names. Just like I had to work on saying Google Lethu's name, but I think I got it now. So yeah, please, always correct me if I get off on that. I guess I got like one more thing I'll say before I get you out of here. Don't want to keep you too much longer, but I
Okay.
do definitely want to have you back again. Definitely want to do that. And
Yeah,
and
absolutely. Anytime.
of course you're welcome on all three of my shows. And for
And the
those who
same
don't know,
same
I
thing
have
as
a
well. Any of my shows, you want to work that out? Let's talk about it. We'll do that.
yeah, it would be my honor to come on
Okay, we'll work that out.
chop it
We'll
up.
work that out.
Yes, we will do that. So guys, make sure to look for that into the future. But I was thinking that with what is going on in the systems here. This is dovetailing back to what I was talking about, the elites and how empires start to collapse. What I like, I'll use an example. Henry Ford, and I know there's controversies. We're not going to talk about the controversies right now. Just like for instance, I could bring up Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson was a horrible individual, but what Andrew Jackson did, trying to push back against the banks, was probably one of the greatest things that he's never given credit for. Now, he's still a horrible, racist, evil, murdering tyrant.
And who totally messed up his wife's divorce, but we'll talk about that later.
Yeah. We can definitely talk about that. But if somebody does one thing good, you can at least, especially if it's something on a major scale, we have to be able to have the nuance to bring those things up. And I look at Henry Ford. Henry Ford had the mindset that it's not like he gave the weekend. He didn't try to push the weekend because he's like, they need more time off. No, his self-serving purpose was that I want them to be able to go out and go buy my cars.
Right.
And so if they're working, and then going to church on Sunday, working 6 days a week, and then when are they going to have time to purchase? And so that's why he worked on better benefits, time off, 40-hour work week, all of these things like that to help, consumers. And that was smart thinking, which businessmen did back then. I'm not saying that they were benevolent and trying to be on our sides.
No.
But they understood. I got to make sure that I keep a customer serving base. So I got to make sure enough money's out there, time off, all those things. Well, now we have a certain level of greed with the children's of these major corporations, where they don't give a damn about giving you insurance anymore because I gotta fulfill shareholder profits. And so that extra 2% or 0.5% that I get up, it's gonna come off the backs of cutting out, forms of insurance which we used to pay for, or it's gonna come at, let me raise, the insulin price on this, or it's gonna come at, this diabetes or dialysis, let's just keep hiking all these things up so we can just keep getting more. Our shareholders can keep getting more. And that short-sighted thinking it's good for them in the short term, but that is how these empires, that greed, that excessive greed is what leads to the collapses of these systems. Because we got to remember, we're still a consumer society. We're literally a consumer world. That's what the whole world bases off of. And when you get rid of all your consumers, how do you keep things going? And that thinking it doesn't compute with the elite.
I think you're right about that. I mean, I know we need to wrap this up, but I just want to put it out there though. Would you rather, maybe with the question, and we can conclude with this, I guess, or whatever you want to do. Would you rather that your employer pay you a good wage so that you can make your own choices about things like insurance and other types of benefits? Or do you want your employer to just provide you with benefits instead of cash? Because there's this whole thing, you will own nothing and you will be happy, which I know has been a bit sensationalized, but it's the idea of, do you really want to be dependent on your employer, say for educational benefits, your health? And I know that health benefits came in during World War II because they had wage caps, so they were trying to entice people by bringing in insurance. But there were, at this point, people, I think there's a real risk of people becoming very dependent on their employer for things like education, for things like various types of benefits. I don't want to necessarily be dependent on my employer because my employer and I have different interests. What about living wages? And what about, say, having a universal health plan in the country? Why shouldn't the state who is taking taxes, fees, and fines from us? Why doesn't the state provide education as needed and healthcare as needed and allow people to make their own decisions and go about their lives without being tied to a corporation? A topic for another time, but that's a concern.
Yeah, I definitely do want to go into that topic, and I'm gonna make sure to put a button. Well, me, how I am is whenever I have somebody on, especially I've had them on before, I always go back and review the last interview or conversation, and so I'm gonna definitely take some notes from this one for what us to talk about next time around, because I definitely there's so much I want to get into on that one.
There's so much, yeah.
I figured for those who haven't seen the new one, and I think I've made it unlisted this time around because I was having troubles uploading it. But I guess I will show the intro real quick. You interested in seeing that?
Sure,
Lainie?
I'd love to see it. Love to see it.
This is my new intro for the Political Matrix, and I will be creating, I guess, another intro for this one. I used to do it when I did uploads. I would always create a different one, and I kind of missed that a little bit. But I am going to make one for this one also. Oh, I guess I need to back that up. Back to the beginning.
You were here because
let's see. Is that full screen? Let's make sure. Oh, wrong screen over there. But yes, hopefully you check it out. Notice that you might see yourself in there.
Okay, cool.
All right, here we go. This is the new Political Matrix intro for the time being. You guys know me. I'm always creating different ones, so we'll see how long I keep it.
Really get down to understanding this political matrix.
Out there, the stunt double. He walked out. He's got an oximeter on his back. I'm like, you gotta keep other. Marcus said on his other show. He was like, American politics is simply pro wrestling.
He became afraid of everyone because people were reporting on each other.
We're living out Minority Report too as well. And you know why we know that, boss? Because we've been reporting on it. Yeah, I know.
All the black people in this country be willing to take a reservation.
That's what the Nation of Islam was asking for.
To put a couple of clips together.
It's crazy to see how much Martin Luther King really began to look like, damn, man, Malcolm was fucking right.
I mean, what is the elite's end game?
There's this assumption that as a black commentator or black journalist that you're not informed.
Relationships, that's a skill we have to learn.
It's even more kind of mind-blowing because we're supposed to be the multicultural space.
Trying to drum up money to keep the war machine going so they can keep the donors happy.
Yeah. Do the Chinese own part of that?
Began a long time ago. Ukraine has had a neo-Nazi problem for decades.
Proof of sanction, am I right?
I don't know if Domcopters will do it, but something's got to be able to save the world.
From the private industry here.
Like I say, people come on here, they can say stuff they don't normally say on their own, which is fine.
Oh, it's McDonald's. Whoop-de-doo.
Ooh.
And their cholesterol is going to go down. Yeah, good.
Look, we only exist because we have the biggest military, kid.
And silencing a person like Julian Assange. Because it affects everybody. And today, last week, believe you me, because they know who you are. They watch. They got people that's going out there. They don't want you guys having the conversations that you're having on this show. Mm-hmm. So it affects the political matrix today.
That's cool. I like it. No, I like that you get so many different voices on the show. I think it's great. And yeah, absolutely.
I mean, that's the goal I tried to shoot for. And I was like, I know that there were so many good nuggets in here that I'm like, for the one which I create for this one, I definitely can't wait to start chopping it up. Just a little process for people. It is not quick and easy when I do these. So
no, people don't have any understanding, folks. Support your content creators because you don't realize when you might see a little bit of video or audio, there are hours that go into that. People don't realize how much time goes into this content creation behind the scenes.
Yes.
There's editing, there's guest coordination, there's pre-show, post-show. There's a lot. So do what you can to help out these great folks, because they're bringing to you content and information and interviews that you are not going to get anywhere else.
I mean, just like this one. I mean, I'm sure you guys will see Lainie on her show. You'll see her on, Hard Lens. You guys will see her in different other areas. But depending on who a person is talking to, it depends on which information you're going to get out of that dialogue. And sometimes it just might have to be a different person they talk to, so you can bring up some of the gems which like Lainie brought out. So I mean, I just want to definitely say thank you again for coming by. I'm glad you had the time. It was definitely
I'm always
my
happy
pleasure.
to come on, and I want to get you on my shows, both radio and on Hard Lens. Let's talk. This week later on this week. Let's talk about getting some stuff set up. But I'm delighted to be on the show. I love the conversation. I love the interaction with your audience. This is cool.
I'm wondering, could you DM me real quick in the private chat the link to is it separate from Hard Lens? Because I can put Hard Lens in there real quick.
Let me just send this off to you.
Okay, because
99.
Kanye was asking, and I want to make sure that they're aware. I've after having Dr. Gugule through on, I've had more of a I've had a couple of new followers coming out of Africa and specifically South Africa, and I'm loving the conversation, dialogue, and energy, and I want more people to be able to to have these global conversations, and this is like what
Absolutely.
I'm all about.
And they may be interested in this project that I'm working on right now. It's a revitalization of shortwave radio, which is a very important tool globally for communicating news and information in areas where media is censored or where internet is not readily available. And right now, many US-based stations, frankly, have a lot of hate preachers, a lot of literally flat earthers, and that kind of nonsense. And I'm part of a project called Radio Angela right now, where we are putting together blocks of culture and entertainment for people. And right now I'm reciting poetry during intermissions of classical music. But also starting in July, I'm going to be part of a project called Orwellian Airwaves with Lainie Petersen. I'm going to be reading 1984.
Ooh, yeah, that's gonna be good.
Yeah, it's gonna be cool. So anybody who's interested, let me know. Keep in touch with me on Twitter. That's where I put most of my stuff is up on Twitter. So follow me on Twitter. I've also put in the private chat, Marcus, 99perspectives.tv. That's
and I just put it down there in the chat.
Yeah.
So
and there it is.
I know definitely me and Shadow and Jack, we that's you're definitely getting into our wheelhouse in our area that we love to talk about, our eyes.
Well, I'd love to come on and talk about it, about what we're doing with the shortwave sometime. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I'm gonna make sure to keep that lines of communication open with you, Lainie. I mean, like I said, when I first started seeing you guys' content, I want to say maybe it was 2018. Because I've listened to Hard Lens for a while. Well, once they started on YouTube.
Okay.
Because I was looking something as an escape from TYT.
Story of everybody's life. Yeah.
And I was like, first it caught my attention on how sleek and organized and everything it was. And I said, wow, these guys they're pretty professional. They got their shit together. And then I would hear the content, and also the fact that you guys are from the Midwest, it really caught my attention because there was no voices out of the Midwest at all. Really.
Right.
So, I mean, awesome job that you guys do over there. Let me put in, let me pull up Hard Lens also while we're here, and I will put that in the chat. That way you guys can have Hard Lens Media also. Yeah, I'm just trying to connect as many people as possible. And also, some of these other content creators in other countries are not even, you don't even have to be a content creator. Let me fix that. Anybody who has a perspective, who's not afraid to hop in front of the camera, who'd like to have a conversation with me or any of the people which I interact with, just like Lainie or Kid or, Shadow Ben or Franco or, there's so many names. I don't want to, miss anybody. So I'll stop naming names at this point. But just DM us. Like I tell people all the time, my DMs are wide open. Lainie can attest to that.
Yeah.
And I just want everybody to, have these conversations and talk. So that is the best way. Let me find it. Where's it at? I'm there, sort of. But, I'm not the brightest with my tech. I'm still working on any. I've only gotten better at the editing stuff because I used to do mostly uploads.
Yeah.
And so since I was only doing uploads, I would upload something, then go back and be like, that looked kind of crappy. And some of the stuff with like, thank God whoever came up with screen record, I love them. But that said, I got the link in the chat. Everybody, let me double click that link and make sure you guys see it there. That should be Harlan's. If it's not, yell at me in my DMs that I screwed up. Marcus, you've been bad, and I'll fix that. But any closing words that you'd like to say, Lainie, before we get out?
Well, I want to thank everybody for showing up today. You have other ways to spend your weekends, and I appreciate your taking the time to do this. Marcus, of course, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I would encourage people, I kind of share Marcus's pessimism in many ways, but I do think there are good times to be had. There are still a lot of good folks out there. They're probably in your neighborhood.
Yeah.
And, this is a time to make connections. I know it's frightening for a lot of people right now, but get out and about, go to your library, go to your town hall meetings, support your local media, including their newspapers, and radio, whatever is out there. And do feel free to get in touch with me if you want some ideas for ways to get together and do things locally, guys. And there are options out there. I need to talk to Kit because I want to put together a video on that. I'll be letting you know about that, Margaret.
Okay.
But Marcus,
and know me, I'll be retweeting that out as soon as I get it.
Because I want to put a show together on using some legacy or old technologies for staying connected in communities, even when the internet isn't serving you. So in any case, but I encourage you to do all that. Thank you all so much. And I look forward to hopefully being on the show again sometime.
Oh yeah, it won't be long. It won't be long.
Okay.
And make sure to give a lot of love to my brother Kit out there.
Absolutely, I will.
It's always fun talking to Kit. And one of these days I got to get Daniel on here. I'm a fan from afar, and I need to make that meet and greet with Daniel one of these.
Yeah, Daniel's awesome. He is, the man is working harder than anybody right now with our studio and everything. By the way, on June 25th, if you're in Chicago, on June 25th. We are having an open house at the studio. You have to RSVP, but it's free to come. It's free to come to the studio. We have food, we have drink. It's a way to see the studio, see what we do, see what we can do for you if you are a content creator or want to be one. Collaborate with other creators. But if you're in the Chicago area, do check us out for that.
And I want to put a heads up out there. I know that I'm not sure when. I don't have it penciled on my schedule yet, but when I do make the time to get out to Chicago, I will be making sure to put notice out there. So anybody who would like to meet with me when I go in and visit, all the wonderful people over at 99 Perspectives, at Harlan's, then you guys can actually come out and be able to meet me there also, hopefully. So, I'll just let you guys know when I'm in the area of these different places, I'm very approachable. Anybody can walk up and talk to me. So, just keep that in mind. We're just average people when it comes down to it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much.